A war of words has been brewing between Trump and Starmer, and it seems to have been missed in the media. And it's about the NHS, and in particular whether or not it should be privatised and to what extent, in a thinly veiled criticism by Donald Trump about socialism, and of course his little lapdog Nigel Farage, who seems to be pounding on about privatisation.
I think we're going to have to think about healthcare very, very differently. And I think we're going to have to move to an insurance-based system of healthcare. Frankly, I would feel more comfortable that my money would return value if I was able to do that through the marketplace of an insurance company than just us trustingly giving $100 billion a year to central government and expecting them to organise the healthcare service from cradle to grave.
And in America, there are two types of service if you're ill. There's the one with insurance and one without. And currently, there are 28 million Americans without private health insurance.
So this is the table saw. It was spinning that way.
This is Rick.
When I did it, I was ripping a piece of wood and I grabbed it right here and it hit a knot.
He sawed off the tops of two of his fingers.
And just zipped. I don't have insurance. How much is this going to cost? I'm going to have to pay cash for this, $2,000-$3,000.
Rick also doesn't have health coverage. So the hospital gave him a choice. Reattach the middle finger for $60,000 or do the ring finger for $12,000.
It's an awful feeling to just try to put a value on your body.
Being a hopeless romantic, Rick chose the ring finger for the bargain price of $12,000. The top of his middle finger now enjoys its new home in an Oregon landfill.
I can do that thing where, you know, the old man used to like pull the finger off.
Maybe the easiest thing for us to do on the Brexit camp is just to talk about the net figure. And the net figure is £34 million every single day, £10 billion a year. And I say that is too much, and we should spend that money here in our own country on our own people. Okay. You know what I'd like to do with the 10 billion? I would like that 10 billion to be spent helping the communities in Britain that your government damaged so badly by opening up the doors to 8 and then 10 former communist countries. And what people need here are schools, hospitals, GPs. That's what they need.
Can I ask about money? The £350 million a week we send to the EU, which we will no longer send to the EU, can you guarantee that's going to go to the NHS?
No, I can't, and I would never have made that claim. That was one of the mistakes I think that the Leave campaign made.
The NHS model isn't working. You can't get GP appointments, which means the model is wrong. The model through which we fund health is wrong. It's a very, very different way of funding the NHS. It's rather like those that can afford, through their taxes, pay into an insurance scheme. And it's managed as if it was a private company.
This is Larry and Donna, and they've ended up moving in with their daughter.
Look at all that.
We'll get everything organized.
Yeah, we will. We will.
What do we do with the computer?
It stays.
It stays there.
So this is where Heather talked about we might have to put bunk beds.
I see what she's talking about.
Yeah.
They both had well-paid jobs and insurance. Donna was a newspaper editor, and Larry was a machinist. Unfortunately for Larry, he had a heart attack, and then he had another heart attack, and then he had a third heart attack. Donna was then diagnosed with cancer. And in the end, despite having that insurance and well-paid jobs, they had to sell.
If somebody had told me 10 years ago this was going to happen to us because of healthcare, I would have said it's not possible. Not in the United States. We wouldn't let that happen to people.
Sorry, God.
And of course, what Farage wants and what Trump wants seems to run parallel.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Nigel Farage.
Because in this little spat that seems to be taking place between Starmer and Trump, there was a message that was sent out in the news by a Trump aide telling the UK to choose US free market over socialist EU. And it was interesting that they used the word socialist, and it actually made me go, well, who is this guy? Have a listen to this.
Capitalism is a lot more important than democracy. I'm not even a big believer in democracy. I always say that democracy can be two wolves and a sheep deciding on what to have for dinner.
That's the same Trump aide that said that the UK should get over being socialist and being with the EU. And Moore went further when he told the BBC that if the UK moved towards more of an American model of economic freedom, it would spur the Trump administration's willingness to the free trade agreement with the UK. In fact, this is something Trump has been angling for ever since Theresa May was in power.
Do you agree with your ambassador that the entire economy needs to be on the table in a future trade talk, a trade deal, including the NHS? And Prime Minister, are you tempted to take the Prime Minister President up at his word and stick around for a bit until the trade deal is done?
I think we're going to have a great trade deal, yes. I think we're going to have a great and very comprehensive trade deal. Look, I think everything with a trade deal is on the table. When you're dealing in trade, everything's on the table. So NHS or anything else, or a lot more than that. But everything will be on the table, absolutely.
And then with Boris Johnson.
Our National Health Service will not be on the table.
And if you think Farage has given up on this idea, far from it, he's still talking about it in 2024 and broadcasting it to the nation in things like The Telegraph and GB News and on his social media. What is happening is that the UK is being hit on two sides. We've got Nigel Farage wanting to privatise it because deep down he's a neoliberal and he doesn't like the NHS because it's socialist. And with Donald Trump, well, it's a little bit more nuanced. Essentially, pharmaceutical industries in the US are one of the biggest lobbying groups.
In the past 2 years alone, pharma industry has spent more than $500 million, and that's more than the alcohol, tobacco and defence industry combined.
And the papers that they've put in front of Trump has made him believe that actually foreigners like the UK are price gouging, and that's causing high prices in the US.
It's time to end the global freeloading once and for all. I have directed U.S. Trade Representative Bob Lighthizer to make fixing this injustice a top priority with every trading partner.
The NHS drug bill could be a lot more if it lost the power to drive down the price of the medicines it buys. Take Humira, the drug that transformed Kira's life. This packet cost the NHS £1,400, but in America it would cost more than £8,000. And here's another drug called Eliquis, used to treat strokes and blood clots. These tablets cost the NHS less than £60, but in America they would cost more than £350.
The NHS, by negotiating with foreign countries in one big block, is saving us billions. Have a listen to this.
Dr. Andrew Hill is an expert on global drug pricing.
Our annual drugs bill for the NHS is 18 billion. If we had to have American drug prices, we're talking about 18 billion a year going to 45 billion. So that's an extra 27 billion pounds a year, or 500 million pounds a week extra for the NHS to pay.
That would be an extra 27 billion to the budget. So when Trump and his advisors are all telling us to side with the US and open up the market and reject socialism, it was really refreshing to hear Keir Starmer tell Trump to get stuffed.
So I want to be clear at the outset, against the backdrop of these dangerous times, the idea that we must choose between our allies, that somehow we're with either America or Europe, is plain wrong. I reject it utterly. Attlee did not choose between allies. Churchill did not choose. The national interest demands that we work with both.
What's more interesting is that between 2014 and 17, the NHS was being ranked as one of the best healthcare systems in the world. But Farage and other neoliberals are determined to break that down despite its rankings. And it's also important to bear in mind that austerity has had a major impact. So despite austerity starting in 2008, the NHS for almost 9 years continued to beat performance targets. Yet Nigel Farage and other neoliberals would have you think that actually the NHS can't work and was never designed to work, when all evidence, despite what they're saying, shows the opposite. In fact, I'd go even further and point out that there are huge advantages to having a one-tiered system when dealing with a pandemic, because all communication and organisation can be streamlined. So tell me what you think about Keir Starmer's response. Was that him telling him to get stuffed? Because that's how I read it, albeit in a very British way. And if Trump and Farage are working together to bring down the NHS, one for neoliberal reasons, and Trump, who seems to believe lobbyists when they put papers in front of him, even though they're clearly gouging Americans who he's meant to be protecting. And finally, do you really think we should get rid of the NHS? I know it's got its problems, but compared to the other systems, it seems to be number one when funded correctly. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and to my patrons and YouTube members, thank you so much. You do keep this channel going and growing. If you'd like to become one, there's a link in the description. Otherwise, thanks for listening. Bye for now.